I'd like to speak about what I consider to be the most fundamental challenge of human existence: finding the courage to be imperfect in a world that demands perfection. Each of us enters this world as a small, helpless being, utterly dependent on others. This initial experience of inferiority is not a pathology, but the very foundation of our humanity. It is the starting point from which all growth emerges. Consider the child learning to walk, falling repeatedly but rising each time with renewed determination. The child does not abandon the effort because perfection eludes them. They embrace the struggle precisely because growth lies within it. Throughout human history, this fundamental drive to overcome limitations has propelled our greatest achievements. Think of the Wright brothers at Kitty Hawk, attempting flight after flight, learning from each failure until they finally soared above the earth. Or Marie Curie, who conducted thousands of experiments, enduring countless setbacks in her quest to understand radioactivity. These pioneers didn't succeed despite their failures. They succeeded because they were willing to fail, learn, and persist. As I look around at modern society, I see a troubling pattern. So many people have become trapped in what I call the neurotic pursuit of superiority. They believe they must be exceptional, flawless, and superior to have value. This misguided quest leads not to fulfillment, but to isolation, anxiety, and a profound disconnection from our fellow human beings. Let me be clear. The healthy pursuit of improvement is not the problem. We are naturally inclined toward growth and mastery. The difficulty arises when we measure our worth by our ability to rise above others rather than by our contribution to the human community. I've spent decades observing how this compulsion toward superiority manifests in various walks of life. Consider Howard Hughes, a man of extraordinary talent who amassed tremendous wealth and influence, yet became increasingly isolated and troubled. Or brilliant minds like Isaac Newton, whose intellectual rivalries and need to dominate debates revealed how even genius can be distorted by the need for superiority. Look at the countless public figures whose fear of aging drives them to desperate measures to preserve their appearance. All are variations on the same theme: the misguided attempt to overcome feelings of inferiority through dominance rather than connection. Let me tell you about Thomas Edison, a figure who exemplifies a healthier approach. History records that Edison failed over 10,000 times before successfully creating the electric light bulb. When asked about these failures, Edison famously replied, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This perspective reveals a man free from the paralyzing fear of imperfection. Edison understood that each attempt, successful or not, was valuable, not just for what it produced, but for what it taught. What enabled Edison to persist was not just personal ambition, but a vision of how his work would benefit humanity. He wasn't merely seeking personal glory. He was seeking to solve problems that would improve human life. This orientation toward contribution rather than mere competition is what I consider the hallmark of psychological health. What is the alternative to this neurotic pursuit of superiority? This is where the concept of Gemeinschaftsgefühl becomes essential, a term I use to describe social interest or community feeling. It is the capacity to see oneself as part of a larger whole, to find meaning in contribution rather than competition. Consider for a moment, what is the most profound source of joy in your own life? Is it not those moments when you've connected deeply with another person, when you've contributed something meaningful, however small, to the well-being of another? This is not coincidental. We are social beings, designed to find fulfillment through cooperation, and mutual support. The life of Jane Goodall offers a wonderful illustration of this principle. As a young woman with no formal scientific training, Goodall might have felt profoundly inadequate among established scientists. But her focus wasn't on proving her superiority or even her equality. Instead, she directed her attention toward understanding chimpanzees and ultimately protecting them. Her work revolutionized our understanding of these remarkable creatures and ourselves. What drove her wasn't the desire to be recognized as brilliant, but a genuine interest in and concern for beings outside herself. Let me share with you the story of Eleanor Roosevelt, a woman whose life illustrates this principle beautifully. Despite being born into privilege, Roosevelt struggled with deep insecurity and a sense of personal inadequacy. She was told as a child that she lacked beauty, and this early experience of inferiority might have limited her had she allowed it to define her. But rather than pursuing external validation, Roosevelt chose to redirect her energy towards social contribution. She transformed the role of First Lady from a ceremonial position into one of meaningful advocacy. Her work for civil rights, women's advancement, and human dignity worldwide stemmed not from a need to prove her worth, but from genuine social interest. What's remarkable about Roosevelt is how she embraced her imperfections publicly. "Do one thing every day that scares you," she advised. Words from someone who understood that growth comes through facing our limitations, not hiding from them. The profound satisfaction she found through service provided a sense of meaning that no personal achievement could have matched. Consider also the remarkable transformation in the life of Andrew Carnegie. Born into poverty, Carnegie could have been driven solely by the need to prove his worth through the accumulation of wealth. Indeed, for part of his life, he pursued business success with singular focus, becoming one of the wealthiest individuals in the world. But what makes Carnegie's story truly instructive is how his orientation shifted in his later years. He came to believe that the man who dies rich dies disgraced, and devoted himself to giving away his fortune for the public good. He established thousands of public libraries, founded educational institutions, and supported peace initiatives. This shift from acquisition to contribution reflected a profound psychological maturation, from compensating for feelings of inferiority through wealth accumulation to finding fulfillment through social contribution. This brings me to what I believe is the heart of mental health: the capacity to say yes to life despite its inherent difficulties. Life presents us with three unavoidable tasks: work, community, and love. How we approach these tasks determines not just our psychological well-being, but the very quality of our existence. Work, in its broadest sense, is about contribution, using your unique abilities to add value to the world. Community involves finding your place among others, living cooperatively rather than exploitatively. And love, perhaps the most challenging task, requires the courage to meet another as an equal, to be vulnerable, to prioritize mutual growth over personal advantage. None of these tasks can be mastered perfectly, and that is precisely the point. It is in the striving, in the willingness to engage imperfectly but sincerely, that we discover what it means to be fully human. Let's consider how differently people approach these essential life tasks. In the realm of work, some individuals like Henry Ford revolutionized industry not just to amass personal fortune, but to create products that would improve ordinary lives and to create employment opportunities for thousands. Compare this to the robber barons who exploited workers and manipulated markets solely for personal gain. Both achieved economic success, but with profoundly different psychological orientations and social consequences. In the domain of community, think of someone like Mahatma Gandhi, who identified so completely with his people that their suffering became his own. His famous Salt March was not an act of individual heroism, but an expression of deep solidarity. His power stemmed not from domination, but from his capacity to unify millions around shared ideals of justice and dignity. In contrast, dictators throughout history have approached community as something to control rather than participate in, leaving legacies of oppression rather than inspiration. And in love, that most delicate and demanding of human tasks, consider the example of Pierre and Marie Curie, whose partnership embodied mutual respect and shared purpose. Their relationship wasn't about possession or control, but about walking side by side toward common goals. Their personal connection enhanced rather than restricted each partner's individual development. How different this is from relationships based on power, jealousy, or the use of another as a means of boosting one's own fragile ego. Let me share a fundamental truth that many find difficult to accept. You are not the center of the universe, and this is wonderful news. The belief that everything revolves around us, that every setback is a personal failure, that every criticism is an attack on our worth, is an exhausting fiction. When we can laugh at our mistakes, when we can see our struggles as part of the universal human experience rather than a unique personal deficiency, we taste true freedom. This is what I mean by the courage to be imperfect. This courage manifests in simple yet profound ways. It's the student who raises her hand even when unsure of the answer. It's the father who apologizes to his child for losing his temper. It's the artist who shares her work despite its flaws. These acts require more genuine courage than any showcase of strength or superiority. Throughout history, we find inspiring examples of this courage. Consider Ludwig van Beethoven, who composed some of his most transcendent music after becoming deaf. Instead of retreating in shame or despair when faced with what many would consider a career-ending limitation, he found a way to continue creating beauty. Or consider Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who led America through economic depression and World War while confined to a wheelchair, a condition he neither denied nor allowed to define him. These figures remind us that our limitations, whether physical, intellectual, or circumstantial, need not determine our capacity for meaningful contribution. Often, it is precisely in wrestling with our limitations that we discover our unique gifts and purpose. I want to address directly those of you who feel discouraged, who believe that your past determines your future. Consider the remarkable story of Helen Keller, born both deaf and blind, yet rising to become one of the most influential figures of her time. Or Abraham Lincoln, who endured repeated failures and crushing depression before achieving greatness. These lives demonstrate one of the most liberating aspects of my approach to psychology, the recognition that we are not prisoners of our past circumstances. Yes, early experiences shape us, but they do not define us. Think also of Frederick Douglass, born into slavery, who not only secured his own freedom, but became one of history's most eloquent advocates for human liberty. Or Oprah Winfrey, who transformed a childhood marked by poverty and abuse into a platform for positive influence on millions. These lives demonstrate that what matters is not what happens to us, but what we choose to do with what happens to us. Each morning presents a new opportunity to reinterpret your life story, to choose a different response to old challenges. The meaning you assign to events is far more significant than the events themselves. This is not empty optimism, but a practical truth. Your perception creates your reality. Consider a simple example. Two people lose their jobs. One sees catastrophe, evidence of personal failure and a bleak future. The other sees opportunity, a chance to reassess priorities and pursue more meaningful work. Same circumstance, dramatically different experiences. Let me share with you the story of Walt Disney, who was once fired from a newspaper because he lacked imagination and had no good ideas. Imagine if he had accepted this assessment as defining truth, rather than one person's limited perspective. The world would have lost not just beloved entertainment, but a visionary who transformed our cultural landscape. Or consider J.K. Rowling, who was a struggling single mother on public assistance when she began writing the Harry Potter series. She faced multiple rejections before finding a publisher willing to take a chance on her work. What if she had interpreted these rejections as proof of her inadequacy rather than merely obstacles to overcome? This power to choose our perspective is our greatest human endowment. We cannot control all that happens to us, but we can always control what we do with what happens to us. I want to challenge each of you listening tonight. Examine the fictions you've created about yourself and your limitations. Perhaps you believe you're not a people person, or bad with numbers, or too old to change. These are not facts, but interpretations. Stories you've told yourself so often that you've forgotten they are stories. What if you held these beliefs more lightly? What if, instead of saying, "This is how I am," you said, "This is how I've chosen to be until now"? Consider the remarkable transformation of Malcolm X, who reimagined himself multiple times throughout his life, from troubled youth to spiritual leader, from separatist to advocate for universal brotherhood. Or Maya Angelou, who reinvented herself as dancer, singer, activist, poet, and professor, never allowing herself to be confined by others' expectations or her own past identities. These lives reveal that identity is not fixed, but fluid, continuously shaped by the choices we make and the meanings we create. Your past has indeed influenced you, but it need not determine your future unless you grant it that power. I've observed that most unhappiness stems from self-centeredness, not in the sense of selfishness, but in the sense of excessive self-focus. When we are continuously taking our emotional temperature, evaluating our status, and worrying about how we appear to others, we create a prison of self-concern. Think of the countless hours people spend ruminating on past mistakes or anxiously anticipating future challenges. This mental habit keeps us trapped in cycles of self-absorption that paradoxically increase rather than alleviate our suffering. The antidote is simple but challenging. Turn your attention outward. Ask not, "How can I feel better?" but "How can I contribute more?" Not, "What can I get from this situation?" but "What can I bring to it?" This shift from self-concern to social interest is the most reliable path to mental health I have discovered in my decades of work. Consider the life of Albert Schweitzer, who abandoned a comfortable career as a renowned organist and theologian to establish a hospital in Africa. Or Jane Addams, who found her life's purpose in creating Hull House to serve Chicago's immigrant communities. These exemplary individuals discovered what countless others have confirmed. Those who focus on contribution often find that their personal suffering diminishes not as a direct goal, but as a welcome side effect. Look at the life of Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps not by focusing on his own suffering, but by finding ways to serve fellow prisoners, sharing food, offering encouragement, even delivering improvised lectures on psychological resilience. His experience led him to conclude that the more one forgets himself by giving himself to a cause to serve or another person to love, the more human he is. Or consider Mother Teresa, who found profound meaning not in pursuit of personal comfort or recognition, but in tending to those society had abandoned. When asked how she could touch those with leprosy or other disfiguring conditions, she replied, "I see Jesus in every human being." This capacity to see beyond herself, to perceive the sacred in the suffering, exemplifies the transformative power of social interest. Before we conclude our time together, I want to speak directly to parents. You bear an extraordinary responsibility, for the family is the crucible in which the child's sense of belonging and significance is formed. Remember that children are keen observers, but poor interpreters. They watch everything you do, how you treat your spouse, how you respond to setbacks, how you engage with the world. From these observations, they draw conclusions about their own worth and about what life requires. Consider the contrasting parenting approaches of Theodore Roosevelt Sr. and his impact on his son, the future president. Despite young Theodore's physical frailty and severe asthma, his father never defined him by these limitations. Instead, he encouraged his son's curiosity, celebrated his efforts, and gradually challenged him to strengthen his body. He famously told the boy, "You have the mind, but you have not the body. Without the help of the body, the mind cannot go as far as it should. You must make your body." This approach, encouraging without pampering, challenging without shaming, helped shape one of America's most vigorous and accomplished leaders. Roosevelt never outgrew his asthma entirely, but he refused to be limited by it because he had been taught that his worth came not from perfection, but from persistent effort and contribution. Contrast this with the devastating impact of parents who demand perfection, who respond to a child's B+ with, "Why not an A?" or who make their love contingent on achievement. Such children often grow up believing they must earn the right to exist through performance, a belief that leads either to exhausting perfectionism or to rebellious abandonment of effort. Encourage without pampering, set boundaries without dominating, show them that mistakes are not catastrophes, but opportunities for growth, and perhaps most importantly, demonstrate through your own life that contribution brings more satisfaction than competition. My friends, as our time draws to a close, I want to leave you with this thought. You are enough, not because you are perfect, but because you are a vital part of the human community. Your worth is not measured by achievements or possessions, but by your willingness to connect, to contribute, to live courageously despite uncertainty. The good life is not found in the absence of problems, but in the presence of purpose. It emerges not from superiority, but from solidarity, not from dominance, but from genuine cooperation. Consider the wisdom in these words from George Eliot's novel, Middlemarch. The growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. This beautiful passage reminds us that meaningful living isn't reserved for the famous or the flawless. It's available to each of us through the simple choice to contribute what we can, where we are, with what we have. The most significant lives are often not those that attract the most attention, but those that add the most value to the lives around them. Find the courage to be imperfect. Embrace your humanity with all its limitations and possibilities. And remember that in reaching out to others, in contributing to something larger than yourself, you fulfill the deepest purpose of your existence.